So Gaurav, welcome to this debriefing session, and congratulations on scoring a 730. So
Thanks, Rajat.
yeah. So we were talking about this, Gaurav, and I want to, your debrief is unique in the sense that it's one of the first debriefs that I'm doing where someone's taken the online GMAT and has done one, and I have 3 more actually over the next 4 days that I'd be doing. So 730 on the online GMAT. Prior to that, you had what, 2670 scores, and what is the first one?
2660s and 1670.
2660s and 1670. So the online GMAT was good for you in the sense that you're able to do really well on quant, you got a Q50, really well on verbal, a V39. So let's talk about your journey. 660 was your first attempt, and then and how did you study for it? And then let's just in about 2 minutes walk through your journey overall.
Sure. So just to give a bit of backstory, since I graduated, I always had GMAT on my mind. So I wanted to do it at a point where I really feel the need to do it. And it was about July of last year where I felt like, I was at a stage in my career where I could really use an MBA to really move into management consulting, which was my long-term goal. So I started with my preparation, and I think what I did really wrong at that point was just not have a structured preparation in place. So I was doing all sorts of things. I was going through, I started with official guide. I did the GMAT club tests. I did Kaplan workbooks. I did Manhattan strategy guides. So I didn't really focus on one thing. I instead just spread it across a lot of different resources.
What was the thought process behind it?
I did not have much of a thought process, actually. I just thought the more questions I solved, the better. And I didn't really focus on learning concepts so much at this point. So I just felt I studied for CAT back in last year of my college. So I thought that, some of the things were still ingrained, but it was 8 years since I moved out of college. So did not have a lot still left, from my college days or school days.
So 660 is still a good score. What was the split at that time?
It was a Q44, V35.
V35, Q44. So, I mean, and you live in the UK. So, I mean, you have a certain natural affinity towards the English language.
I almost thought that I would put more in quant, to be honest, because even though I'm not from an engineering background, I've always loved quant and I've always felt comfortable with math. But I think what happened there was I was just rusty a little bit. And I didn't spend time on concepts, right? So and the main issue was timing for me. So when I analyzed my ESRs, you can see that I spent almost 3 minutes on the first 10 questions and 2.5 minutes in quant on the next 10 questions. And then towards the end, I had 30 seconds per question for the last 8 questions or so.
Okay. So I think we're not going to go into the details because we have so much to talk about, but we were discussing earlier and there were these 4 or 5 pivotal moments that you had during your preparation.
Sure.
The first one was you recognizing that that you needed help. You analyze your ESRs and you isolated areas for improvement. Or rather, the first was actually the call with Sharang where he said focus on CR first. Yeah. So how did Sharang narrow it down to, hey, start with CR?
Sure. So after my first attempt, I got the ESR. My sentence correction was around 94th percentile, and CR and RC were both around 40th percentile, somewhere around that. Okay. So I knew where I needed to work from there. But I think what Sharang told me and something I didn't realize was, again, my timing was off on verbal side as well. So verbal, I was getting a similar pattern of spending a lot more time towards the start, and then towards the last 8 questions or so, I had about half a minute left. So what he suggested was CR because I felt I would do better on CR. RC, I felt that I was always low on RC. My score was always low, but CR, it was more of a surprise to see 40th percentile there. So he suggested I start with CR, and also before that do the master comprehension actually, which was really helpful. And as soon as I started with CR, I absolutely understood the approach to pre-thinking because it was something I'd heard a lot in the past, but I don't think any course helped explain CR or the pre-thinking approach as well as e-GMAT did, and really ingrained in my mind what it was about. And the other thing which I really liked was the application files. So if you see my account, I spent a lot of time on application files, even for questions which I did not, which I got right, because I wanted to see the approach and see, whether I was solving it the right way or not, and also understanding whether I was eliminating the wrong answer choices for the right reasons or not. So that really helped me.
Okay. Now, I have a question. We didn't talk about this earlier, but you were 94 because I didn't have this data point. Because 94th percentile in SC, you still went through a good chunk of the SC course.
I did, because when I started the SE course, I went into it thinking that, I'll breeze through it and I'll get like 99% accuracy or something. But my starting accuracy was pretty low, actually. And the reason I think it was low because I still did not think about the meaning before getting into the question. So for a lot of reasons, I think the 94th percentile was a fluke, because I don't think I was approaching the questions in the right way. And I think the e-GMAT was really helpful in helping me understand the meaning-based approach, which wasn't something I was doing before. And I really liked the modifiers module as well. That was something I wasn't applying as much even in my first attempt.
So that's why I'm saying you probably could sound things out and say this is correct, but despite lack of a structured approach. Having lived in the UK, I think, and being a market researcher, you write probably day in and day out.
Yeah, fair bit.
Fair bit, yeah. Okay, that's good to know. So you did that. You improved on CR. You improved your verbal score to V35, and then you diagnosed that you had 3 still chasms to cover when you took the GMAT the second and the third time, and they were you said word problems, geometry, and reading comprehension.
Algebra, geometry,
geometry, and reading comprehension. So, when was this? What time frame are we talking about over here?
So I'd say this was towards my final attempt, because even for the second and third attempt, I was thinking that, I was almost taking for granted, right? That even if I'm not scoring so well in algebra and geometry and RC, there's still not, there's still a small fraction of the overall test. So I'll be able to be fine with it. But I think GMAT is a test which is really good at exposing your weaknesses. And that's exactly what happened. So RC, I think in the hindsight, I think with the new structure, there are more questions of RC than there were before, right? You get 4 full passages.
It's the weight still the same. It's just that it occupies a greater chunk of your time, but RC, CR, and SC, it's still about a third each.
About a third each. Okay.
So from a number of questions, yes, you're right. But from a weight standpoint, a weighted standpoint, that hasn't changed.
I see. Okay. Yeah, so that's what I did. The last attempt, I thought that, okay, let's just forget about it. Let's deep back the concepts of algebra and geometry and really spend time on those. And that's what I did. So I did the e-GMAT, and I think e-GMAT.
So I think before that, I want to just ask one question. You said algebra and geometry, because I'm going to catch you on things you say. Algebra and geometry, you said you thought were not as important. But ESR gives out that subsection, say algebra geometry has this one line in your ESR on the quant side, which says it accounts for about half of your quant score.
Yeah, so I would say not so important, because I was still not terrible, right? So I was around a 50th percentile on geometry, I think around 68th percentile, somewhere around that. But I felt like other sections I was so strong at that I would be able to mask the weaknesses on these sections instead of really spending time. Because, I think I used to think GMAT as a test where you choose your battle, right? So if you know you're good at a section, you really spend time on it, make sure you get it right. And if you know you're weak at a section, you try to, spend a minute and a half. But if you're not getting it, just move on. Just guess and move on. That's what I was doing.
That's on the test. Yes.
On the test, yeah.
But that's what you would do. But I think there are two caveats to what you said. One is you shouldn't be aiming for a 740 then.
Yeah.
The 740, you're talking about 97th percentile, which means you need to be good or really good at everything. You may not be excellent at it, but you need to be really good at pretty much everything. If you were aiming for a 700, maybe not. 740, that's where it starts to be. The second caveat is that it shouldn't be an important subsection. So if this were PNC probability, I wouldn't bother. But if it's algebra geometry, which accounts for such a major chunk of it, that's where the weight starts to be very, very important. So for example, in number properties, you could let go of statistics, and that's okay. That's a small chunk of a subsection, which is number properties. But algebra by itself is a subsection. Geometry by itself is a subsection. So you were not so good. You were good, but you're not very good in a big chunk of that over there.
Right.
So I think those are the two caveats. But you were saying then you went to the e-GMAT module for algebra and geometry over there.
Yeah, exactly. And just to add one more thing there. So within algebra, I didn't feel that I was weak in every subsection of algebra. Where I needed the most work was inequalities.
Inequalities, okay.
And I think that's just explained beautifully in e-GMAT, because the way you approach it with the number line, I think the whole concept was super clear to me after that. So I spent a lot of time on it. I don't know if my account will show that, but I definitely spent a lot of time on inequalities. But I definitely saw results coming through.
Well, let's see whether your account shows that. Your scores are there. I'm just going to go towards, well, it does. It does. Inequalities and absolute equations. I mean, when I can show the screen. So, on the concept side, practice quizzes, we don't capture the time you look at reviewing the solutions because they're textual solutions. But yeah, I mean, a fair amount of time in the application quizzes. Also in the basic concepts, which is where we explain the number line. So yes, you have spent a fair amount of time. But the nice thing is I like these practice quiz scores. This is really, really nice. This is where a lot of the evaluation happens, and you've done really well over here. So yeah, so you did that, and then you did the same thing with RC. You focused on reading comprehension.
Absolutely, yeah. So what I did with RC was I changed a couple of things, right? So I first of all approached the question in a different way. So when I would get the passage earlier, I would spend maybe a minute and a half or so reading the passage and going straight into the question. What I did now was I started to focus on spending more time on the passage. So get full comprehension of the passage, spent even about 2.5, 3 minutes. And what that does is actually helps you with the timing, because you don't come back to the passage as frequently. So you'd only do that if it's matter of specific information in the passage, but otherwise you are in a pretty good place to answer without coming back to the passage.
And it's not just that; it's also the calm, right? You see a question, and you can say, "Okay, I understand what the question is talking about." And if I don't know if I can't narrow down to the precise answer, I know where to go look for, because I have the confidence that I can get to the answer.
Exactly, yeah, exactly. Another thing which I did in RC was I analyzed my ESR. So by this time I had 3 ESRs. So I had a good database size, which I look at every day for a living. So I looked at that, and if you want, I can share my screen.
Sure, yes. Because I don't think we have access to your ESRs.
I can share them with you. Let me know. Do you see my screen now?
Yes, we do.
Oh, sorry.
I can see the screen, yes.
Okay. I think it's on the secondary screen, so let me just move it.
I see the Google Docs piece.
Yeah. So if you look over here.
No, you were showing the right screen earlier. I just see the Zoom. I see Zoom right now.
My bad. Okay, there we go. So if you see over here within RC, I analyzed.
Yes, I see this now.
Okay, so as I analyzed my report, you can see within RC, I was getting more questions wrong on identify and forward idea. And this was also consistent with my e-GMAT.
The scholarly name stats, right? Yeah, I saw that.
Scholarly name stats, exactly. Yes. So my inference questions, I had lower accuracy versus others.
67% versus 77% in others is what I saw.
Exactly, yeah. So I decided to go through the entire inference module for RC, and that really helped. And another thing which I did was I applied e-GMAT's reading strategies. So I really, one thing I was struggling with a little bit was focus, and using those strategies, where you can understand, how you can predict the next step, or you can really use some of the keywords to what is the author trying to talk about. That really helped, and I think that was something really helped me increase my RC score.
Cool. That's really great. Uh, a couple of things that so you would also mentioned how you created a plan for your final attempt. Do you also want to share that over here, or was this the one?
Yeah, that's exactly the one. So you can sorry, it's opening Google Sheets, but yeah, you can see pretty much like how I started. So I had GMAT books. So because I was struggling with geometry, I spent some time going through that, and then I moved on to e-GMAT. So this was the time I extended my subscription, because the time between my third attempt and the fourth attempt, which was the 730, was about 3 or 4 months before I even started preparation, right? So I was still a little rusty on some of those concepts. So I did the e-GMAT geometry, the inequalities, and again, algebra, the other topics within algebra. And then I went on to official guide this time.
Perfect. So I think given this, I want to talk about now. I think this is a really good segue into Whiteboard. So you can just click on stop sharing if you want to.
Sure.
Yes. So how did you? When in this timeline did you start practicing on the whiteboard? I think just given the fact that you had that sheet over there.
Sure. So as soon as I decided to give another attempt, which was I think around mid of April, I felt that the whiteboard is something that's here to stay. So I decided to just get myself well acquainted. So one of the first videos I saw was someone from Veritas Prep took the online GMAT, and they explained really well, what the whiteboard is like, what are the functions available, what's not. And I think that really helped, right? Because I think a lot of people just outright dismiss the whiteboard and say, don't want to give the e-GMAT. But I've seen a lot of success stories on online GMAT as well, where people have managed to match the score they were getting on mocks.
Oh yeah, I think the whiteboard is a great thing for verbal, by the way. I mean, imagine reading an RC on the right-hand side of the whiteboard, you're taking your notes over there. In
Exactly.
CR, covering the option, doing pre-thinking, you can't see the options if you have the whiteboard covering the options. So,
exactly, yeah. And I think there are a lot of, ways you could use the whiteboard in your favor, right? That's what I did. So I practiced a whole lot on the whiteboard. Every quant question I do from there on was on the whiteboard. And I started approaching questions a little differently. So here's what I started to do. When I would approach a question, I would not jump straight into calculations, and I would actually look at the question and think about, what's the best way to approach this, right? So I took almost 30 seconds trying to understand how I will approach the question, right? And that really made a difference, because I think GMAT is a test for future business leaders and entrepreneurs, and really what is important is a presence of mind and finding sometimes shortcuts and loopholes into questions, and that's something I really implemented on the final attempt with the online whiteboard.
And the Q50 and a V39, both scores better than your prior Quant and Verbal scores, is a testament to how helpful the whiteboard can be if you spend the time learning it.
Yeah, you need to spend time on it, and I think you need to also understand which questions you can't do on the whiteboard, right? Because will throw some questions at you which you can possibly not do on the whiteboard, and then you need to just find the best option and then move on from there.
So one of the things I don't think you're aware of this. We have a channel on our YouTube channel. We have a playlist which shows how do you solve questions using whiteboards. We have about 15 solved examples over there. About half of them are quant. And what we've discovered is we've solved way more questions on that internally. And what we found is there hardly about 3% of the questions that become difficult on the whiteboard. 3% of quant questions, by the way.
Okay.
But if you focus on, for example, expressing exponents, if you have a strategy to express exponents using the keyboard, and if you do pre-processing, which is what you did, what you're going to find is you can do pretty much most questions.
Yeah.
So it's only when you have exponents where you have to do a lot of math with fractions, where you have to do math where you can't infer, is where things start to become complex.
Exactly. And I think also another thing is it makes you a little smarter the way you approach questions, right? Because if you get weird square root questions and you try to solve them, that's not the right way
Yeah,
of
brute
solving this.
force is
A
not
lot of
correct.
times there will be, yeah, a lot of times there will be an easier way to solve it, right? So I think that's something that Whiteboard is really good at, like trying to fix your the wrong practices, right? In a lot of ways.
Yes, I think in some way, in many ways, this is a way to orient you. It modulates you
Yeah,
to move in the right direction. Okay,
yeah, and
one
I think
last.
it's
Sorry,
yeah.
go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, no, no.
I was just adding that I think it's here to stay. So I think if we embrace it, it's good, because I've heard stories of people who had to go to a physical test center and give the exam, and they had to wear a mask the whole time, right? And that's a lot scary for me to do the test like this the whole time, and you're struggling to to breathe, and already there's so much anxiety and stress, right?
I think the other
So
pieces you probably, I mean, the fact that you took it on a computer that you know of in an environment that you're very comfortable with adds a lot to it.
yeah, it does, and I scheduled the exam 2 hours before the time I took it, so that's a flexibility I never had with the physical or the test center
Okay.
GMAT.
So tell me, since we are on that, and I had not thought about asking this, but so you had the proctor. How was that experience with the proctor overall?
It was completely seamless for me. I've heard stories of people really get annoyed by the proctor, but in my case, I didn't interact even once with the proctor. So I don't even know the name of the proctor because I don't think it displayed on my screen. So I had a completely seamless experience.
Okay, and in terms of, I mean, did you connect using Wi-Fi, or did you have an Ethernet cable going into
Yeah.
your PC?
So I connected using Wi-Fi,
Hmm.
and they actually have a system test that they recommend you take before the actual test. So maybe a couple of days before the test, and that really made me confident that I could take it on the test on my computer, and I had the right internet connection speed because you have at least 1 MB connection. So those things I think GMAT has done really well, where they actually give you the option to test your machine and then accordingly give it on that.
Great, that's really good to know. And then you're right. I mean, I think it's the test is very reasonable. It's been it's gotten a bad a rap because just people didn't try the whiteboard, and they think I mean,
Yeah,
anything new. it- Most of us
yeah,
are afraid of change, but frankly, if you embrace it, there are lots of benefits to it. And you're right that
absolutely.
whiteboard's here to stay. In fact, over the last 12 months, I think there's been more than $100 million that's been poured into online proctoring.
Wow.
Just this, not just the technology, but also as a service. There are a few companies in Boston that have gotten about 80 to $90 million worth of funding to provide online proctoring services. So,
Wow.
so that's. I mean, it's here to stay, one way or the other, and I think it's going to make us better test takers in
I
many ways.
think so. Yeah, I think so.
So, okay, so one last piece there. Let's talk about the intensity. You said that, in the last 1 month or so, because of the lockdown, you got into this intense preparation mode, and this kind of helped you a lot in achieving that 730 score. Talk a bit more about it. How did you get that additional time, and then just the personal piece where you made sure that your friends, your wife is aware that you're studying for it. So I think.
Sure. So what I did differently, I would say in the last 1 month or so when I was taking the final attempt, I was able to have a lot more consistent study approach, right? So what I was doing before this, I had a very hectic job, and I was spending, only 1 hour or so on weekdays, and majority of my study would happen on weekends. But now, because I had a lot more time, I was working from home. My wife actually told me that she'll take up all the household work. So I was very lucky in that regard. So I was able to focus completely during that 1 month on GMAT. So I was able to spend almost consistently 4 to 5 hours every day for that 1 month. And I think that consistent study approach really helped in my case.
Okay. Um, you use the same internet that you're using for the test, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And I'm
Is
just,
it patchy?
it's not perfect for Zoom. I'm just trying to really just add this piece. I'm
Ah,
looking at, as you're talking, I'm looking at how much bandwidth am I seeing from your side, because Zoom gives me those stats.
okay.
So your upload speed is about 400 or 402 kilobits per second. That's all that you're uploading. And I mean, it's working okay. It's not, it's not patchy. It's probably at where what I call is that 95%. If 100% is a perfect Zoom call, this is about 95%. Parts of
Okay.
your words as you're finishing your sentences, they're getting chopped off because
Okay.
of that. But
I have a
despite
think that's better. I can put on.
no, that's fine. What I'm saying is, despite that, you had a seamless experience despite about 450 odd kilobits per second
Yeah.
internet connection or so. And yeah, so I think it's not the internet connection is not crazy. And I do Zoom calls with people worldwide. I mean, 80% of our workforce is in India, and they're on Zoom 4 hours a day.
Yeah.
At least with Payalai or Abhi or the 5 or 6 of us who are over here. But then amongst themselves, they're on Zoom another 2 or 3 hours, and it works seamless.
Yeah.
So then what's next for you? Let's talk about this, Gaurav.
Sure. So a little bit of a backstory. So after my third attempt, when I got a 670, I almost accepted that score because I really didn't want to put myself through the whole GMAT journey again. So I applied to INSEAD, which is my dream college, and I got rejected because I think it was because of my GMAT score, because other parts of my profile I felt pretty confident with. So what I did actually after I got my GMAT score was I just wrote to INSEAD again, and I told them that I ended up retaking and I got a 730. So I got a response within, I think, a couple of minutes, and they said that please send us your GMAT score report and we'll analyze and we'll get back to you. So I still don't know if
Yes,
it's going to be a
it
positive
might.
outcome or not, but I have my fingers crossed. Yeah.
And so this was 21st is when you took the test, right?
19th, I think.
19th, okay.
19th.
And
Yeah,
so
21st I got my score. Yeah.
21st. So when did they receive it?
I think a couple of days, I think around 23rd or 24th.
Okay. That did you apply to any other school other than INSEAD?
Not yet. So I have some other schools in mind. So I'm looking at London Business School, HEC Paris, US, and I haven't actually done research on any of the American schools because I always felt like my GMAT was a barrier, and they pay more importance to GMAT in the US than they do in Europe and Asia. So I felt that that was always a barrier. But I think now maybe I could also consider a couple of American schools as well.
And what do you want to? You said you want to go into consulting, right?
Yeah.
Tuck, please apply
Okay.
to Tuck. It's an amazing school.
Is it a stretch school for me, in your opinion? Or do you think I have a
I
shot?
don't think so. I think you have a
Okay.
good shot. I mean, the fact that you worked in the UK and the fact that you're not a typical engineer, I think gives you a fair chance.
Okay.
That's I believe so, and I think you're in a very unique place, frankly. So I mean, I don't know how quickly you want to get uprooted, but there are schools that have deadline before 1st of June. If you have your essays ready, if you apply now, you might still get in.
Yeah, that's another thing I'm a little unsure of, because I feel that like I'm not sure how schools are going to, like, how they are going to adapt their curriculum given the current situation, because a lot of people have to move to online classes, and I guess recruitment will get affected because there's definitely going to be a recession after this. So I'm just thinking whether I should wait for another year to apply, or
So it's the same thing. Which I mean, so if you apply to a US school, you have 2 years.
yeah.
So I mean, things. So I was actually talking to a few people. So there are a few of our employees who are joining these schools in the
Okay.
US. So I was just this morning I was having a conversation with them. So the curriculum. One of these guys is joining Keenan Flagler, and he's
Right.
a hefty scholarship. Sharang is joining Keenan Flagler. Actually,
Oh,
we
okay.
talked to, yeah. So he has multiple scholarships, and Keenan Flagler is his school of choice. So so I was talking to him this morning, and so what he said was the big concern that he has, and I agree with him having gone through the entire process is first semester. I think you can do it online, given that if especially if it has a lot of theory courses in econ, accounting, core of marketing. I think, and stats. Those are courses which are more lecture based than case study based. So that's something which is there. I think the bigger concern, which will be, which people should have, is if you do the first 3 months online, because embassies are not open with regards to visa,
Right.
then as per USCIS law, you can't do an internship till you've had a year of study on US soil.
Okay.
So if, for example, if you had a US visa to study, and then you would go there, I'd say you'd start pretty much, go and start. But what his concern really is what's going to happen with regards to the internships.
Yeah.
Now, it might so happen, and my response to him was, do an unpaid internship for 3 months, and then after that, during the second year, do paid internships where you do that in lieu of a credit. Because when I did my MBA, I did about 5 paid internships during my MBA. The first and second of them were actually during the 3-month summer break. So I had a paid internship. Then I also worked for a startup just because I wanted to get that startup experience. That was an internship that was free of charge. But because of that, during my second year, I continued to get offers from firms to work for them. And I was on an H1 on a student visa too, so I didn't have a green card or another work visa. So in lieu of a few credits, I did 3 more internships. And the beauty of that was when I graduated, I had 2 or 3 offers in Boston where I studied, but then I moved to Phoenix because my in-laws live here in Phoenix, Arizona, and then within a week or so, I had a job offer in Arizona.
All right.
So and what it did for me was, like, I was one of probably the top 5% of class who had done like 5 odd internships. So my post MBA resume, 60% of it was what I've done during the MBA, and it was good professional experience. 40% of it was my prior pre MBA experience, which wasn't the case with majority of my classmates because they had just that one internship to work with. So again, you've got to be hunters, but in this situation. But again, do you want to lose a year, or do you want to just go in that situation as a piece? Is a decision that you have to make.
Yeah. I think it makes sense. And I think also if you think of it from a long-term perspective, right now, MBA will only help in the long term. So definitely, I think it's worth it's worth doing an MBA now or
Hmm.
in a couple of in a couple of months.
Yes. So yeah, I mean, I frankly, if I were you, and if you think your application were ready, then I would apply before the 1st of June to at least one school in the US and see what you get. I mean, worst case, you could say no, you could defer it. Best
Yeah.
case, you might get a scholarship. I mean, that's the thing with, huh?
Late in the application, you think they're open to scholarships even so late in the application? Or?
I think so.
Okay.
And let me actually